RTÉ Rugby Podcast ahead of Ireland, Italy in the Six Nations. Round 2 coming up this weekend. Bernard Jackman is with me. I haven't spoken to you in a while about rugby, Birch. There's loads of other things we can talk about, like politics, like what happens if you just eat crisps. I mean, anything else. But I suppose we better...
I'd be an expert on what happens if you just eat crisps. Go back to rugby, please.
Alan Partridge's line of the year. Right, look, let's pick up where we left off on Monday, maybe again Against the Head. So, look, there has been a bit of reaction across the board to, I guess, suggestions and outlines from yourself, Donal and Fiona, and even to a wider extent as well, rugby journalism, questioning where Irish rugby is headed, what's going wrong, and is it an overreaction? I mean, you've had time to kind of sit back now and read some of the comments and maybe think about what was said. Do you think there is a bit of an overreaction, or are you happy enough that...
No, it's interesting. So John Fogarty, who's a good friend of mine, he was sent out by the IRFU yesterday to do the press.
Yes.
And he said to say Irish rugby is facing into decline is disingenuous. Okay, and I would argue that absolutely they got to see the way forward, and we may win 4 from 5. Okay, in the rest of the Six Nations, but I think it's disingenuous to say that there isn't obvious signs of a bit of a decline. Results would tell you that, and most fair-minded people would say the performances would lead to the fact that this team is not playing the same brand of rugby or quality rugby that they played in the past. But that's one factor. That's the Ireland national team. I think the point that I made and Donal and Fiona made on Monday night was around why. Like, why are we now at a stage where we're one of the older squads in the Six Nations? We're relying on the same faces, players, to help us win games, and those players are out of form by and large, or some of them are out in form. And James Lowe being a good example, he was left out because he wasn't in form. So what we were looking at was the production line, and obviously it was a particularly bad weekend for Ireland because the second team got hammered and the 20s got hammered. So that would lead you to believe that the depth isn't as good as it needs to be. But what I was blown away by, I questioned some of the alignment across the academy system with the youths and clubs and schools, and my emails, because you can get my email on my website, the LinkedIn, Instagram messages, but like people taking time to write 1,000 words around their experiences. And I
saw a couple of them.
Yeah, I sent you a few of them, but there's way more than that. That I need to get back to people because they've taken their time to explain, and some people want to stay anonymous, and some people want to have a phone call or a chat about it further. So it's actually scared me more. I only knew some of the issues because people had told me about them, but it seems as if the eye has been taken off the ball for a while, whether that was swallowing around the success of the national team or whatever. I don't know what the reason is, because unfortunately I actually feel sorry for the IRFU here, because the IRFU have never invested more into the pathways, and yet it just doesn't seem that there's a plan or that they're bringing people together. I'll give you an example. I've just got off a call with World Rugby because I'm part of this Global Rugby Alliance, right? And I'm there as a journalist, broadcaster, but there's different stakeholders in the game. There's current players, there's coaches at club level, coaches at professional level, coaches at international level, there's referees, there's finance people, and we're all feeding into what we feel or where we feel the game should go. And there's a big conference in 3 weeks' time, which is the State of the Game conference, and the decisions and discussions there will lead to what rugby's going to look like at the World Cup in particular, but not just from that. This will go all the way down to under 14s, women's game, etc. This is where it goes. And then obviously at post Rugby World Cup, the review of that will dictate what it looks like for 4 years' time, with lots of modifications on the way for the World Cup in America. My point is that they're engaging with people involved in the game at different levels to try and find a way forward. So regardless if I've got issues with World Rugby or officiating or the game at the moment, at least I'm seeing what they're trying to do to make it better, if that makes sense. I'm sorry, just to finish, long-winded saying, there's a lot of people involved in the game, whether they're parents, whether they're players, whether they're coaches, whether they're fans, and they don't really feel involved, attached to the game. And like, I think a small example is that you go down to Limerick on Friday night for an A game, It's an international. Ireland 15 against England A. 2,500 people there, you know, and Limerick is or was a rugby city, you know, so people give out about the cost of international tickets, and I totally accept it's expensive to come to the Viva, but there's a chance to go with your family or your friends to watch an Ireland selection play England, and you have to say there was apathy towards the game, okay, and that's not picking out Limerick people. I think it's a sign of, unfortunately, just things have slidden a little bit. There's a bit of negativity, and the player and the IRFU might blame us for creating the negativity, whatever. But I just, for whatever reason, everybody isn't as attached to this projects as maybe they were in the past.
That's a massive undertaking from World Rugby's perspective, and there's a lot of vested interests with different vested interests, and everybody keen to ensure that their own little route down and connection to World Rugby is secure, and the developments come through. I mean, I wonder, how do you even go about doing something like that?
That was a brilliant point, because one of the first asks is to leave your national bias behind, you know, so it's a global view. Yeah, and look, we will all give our opinions around what's happening in our area, and that's all important. But is to not try and is to basically angle your thoughts and the decisions that are made around what's best for the game globally, and the game for supporters, players, coaches, fans, referees, etc. So that's the hard part. For example, like if you're being topical this week, I could go mental about the TMO. The lack of a TMO for the Jolly Bear try or the forward pass, you know, if I'm being really biased or whatever I'd say, because that's really relevant to me. That's
Irish classes,
Irish classes. Most of the messages I'm getting is saying, why didn't the TMO look at those two tries? Yet he forensically looked at Michael Milne or whatever. That's not what it's for. It's to actually try and understand, well, why are they trying to give referees more power? Yes, they are. Referees are being, I suppose, encouraged to make decisions quickly, and the TMO should only come in if it's something that's quite clear cut. Okay, so again, I understand that now more than I did last Thursday, and obviously next time I'm broadcasting, or I have to make sure that I explain that to the listeners and viewers. So hopefully we all kind of understand why things are happening the way they are, why they're changing the way they are, why they're staying the way they are, rather than just think it's a conspiracy or it's poor officiating, or you know, the other thing that's topical is the lack of the escorts being taken out, the escort interpretation being taken out, the attractiveness or the disgust that people have about the aerial contest. Well, like, why was that chicken? Like, there was a narrative in Irish rugby that it was set by the South Africans because it suits them more. You know, It wasn't. It was to create transitional opportunities to break the game up, to eventually make the game less ruck focused, okay, and more offloading, playing your feet, which France did. And when it works, Hugh, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it is great.
It is beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, it's proper entertainment, and we just need to get there. That's all.
It's a very hard thing to do, to get so many people into a room, though, on a subject that has so many different views, and get everybody to leave their biases at the door. I mean, it sounds great in theory, but you're always naturally going to have, you know, angles that you're going to want to push based on your experiences from the country that you're from. That's just natural.
Look, so Morgan Tourneur got up or stayed up till 12 midnight in Australia to come on the call. There's people massively motivated. I'm just giving him an example because he gave the time, but when we all push our own agenda to a certain extent, our own bias, and sometimes that's unconscious bias. You know, we don't know we're biased, but I said the quality will be the ability to facilitate all those discussions, and I said, not just broadcasters, we're only one part of it, to funnel that in to hopefully a robust decision process, which is based around data, which we can all get behind, and, like, again, try and make the game safer, better to watch, better to play. They're the three basic ones. You know, they've got different language on it, but they're the things I would say that they want to do.
Well, every person in Ireland now knows that the easy answer to fix Irish rugby problems is to sack Jacques Nienaber at Leinster. I mean, that's pretty obvious, isn't it? Yeah.
Look, we all take wild takes time to time, and depends on what you're chasing. And are you looking for clicks, or do you genuinely believe it? I will say it's not helping Ireland it's a challenge that Ireland haven't had for a while, that Leinster playing one way, right? Okay, but that's the challenge that every international coach has multiplied, bar Scotland and Italy, who only have 2 teams.
Yeah.
Okay, but with 4 teams, it's not too bad considered. Compare that to Steve Borthwick. Compare that to Fabien Galtier. So it's an unusual thing in Irish rugby to have that level of extreme difference. But to blame Jacques Nienaber for players not being able to catch pass, for players not being able to offload, for paper. In actual fact, it's got 0 relevance to Thursday night, because the things that Leinster do very well, Ireland didn't do well. Like basically contestables, defend, etc. So I think he's an easy scapegoat. If anything, we should be happy to have him, because he's won 2 World Cups in a Lions series.
Yeah,
and he has this ability.
To be fair, I know that some South Africans have taken this up as, God, everybody in Ireland is blaming Jacques Nienaber. I don't think that's the case at all. I think it was pointed out, over the weekend, that Irish hand skills are not what they used to be. Leinster's perhaps, and their try scoring is not what it used to be. But that's not Jacques Nienaber's fault. There are many and several reasons why that may be the case, and is the case there. But I guess the headline, and it's very easy to write these headlines and say, oh my God, the Irish think Jacques Nienaber is destroying Irish rugby, which is what happened.
Yeah, but as an international rugby player, or an aspiring international rugby player, you have a personal obligation to make sure you get enough touches in the week to be able to catch pass at the optimum level. You need to make sure that you're fit enough. If what Leinster are doing is more anaerobic, but what Ireland want to do is aerobic, well, you need to make sure that you're doing both. So I think it's nonsensical to blame him, and I think we're lucky to have him. To be honest, I think he's an unbelievable coach, and you speak to any of the Leinster players who work under him, they would die for him and believe in his methods. So it's just, we're scratching. I would be more concerned around how are Ireland going to play.
Yeah.
Like, okay, what's our way of playing look like? Because I think what we saw in Paris was a plan for France, okay, to try and negate their strengths. Obviously, we didn't execute it well. Is that now how Ireland are going to play, or are we going to find a hybrid between that was kick heavy game, kick contestable heavy, to something more in the middle of what we saw in 2023, which was kind of slaves to having the ball in our hands, high phase count, real detail around that, and asking questions of the defence. And we will be even more of an outlier if we go back to that than we were when we started that, because unfortunately teams now don't chase high phase count. So I think France only had more than 5 phases 7 times in the whole game, and they had a lot of possession. So it's just interesting to see where Ireland are going to go.
Ron O'Gara made that point in commentary on the Scotland match. I think the commentator said, "Oh, this is a great start by Scotland. They're running things right." And Ron O'Gara said, "No, actually, they're not doing anything. They're not going forward. They're just tiring themselves out. This is nonsensical." That was the point.
And the end, Hugh, when Scotland needed something to happen, they went 25 phases and got choked without really. And Ireland can do it better than Scotland, but my point is that we would be probably the only team in the world chasing that really high phase count, even though Scotland did it a couple of times. Like I'd imagine when Scotland reviewed that Monday, they were like,
the madness of it.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't think they'll be looking to do it again unless you're going forward. So, but that's fine. It's fine. It's just what Ireland, you would imagine, and this is like Andy Farrell, his first year with Ireland post Joe as head coach. It took a while to kind of, I suppose, land that new style of playing. And then the second year it did land, and we kept improving that all the way to the World Cup. But since then it hasn't really landed, it hasn't been as obvious or as effective. And I think there's been law changes, or law interpretations, which has made it more unlikely to work. So it's just adapting to that. And maybe this weekend, like the ironic thing is, we went into the game fearing our scrum, our line out potentially, and both of them were excellent sources of possession. So we actually had possession, but unfortunately when we kicked it away, we couldn't win it back, and that led to us not having good possession over the course of the game.
On what is our modus operandi? What is the Irish DNA? What is it that we want to be the best at, or what is this Irish style? I was listening to Andy Dunn talking on News Talk during the week, and he said, look, we're never going to be the biggest, we're never going to be the strongest, we're never going to be the fastest, but what we could be better at, the best at, is kicking and passing, which are both obviously very coachable and based on repetition and based on certain skill sets and based on training techniques. They're two things that we could aspire to be, the best kickers and the best passers, and maybe a combination of those. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. But it has to be agreed upon, has to be driven.
Among the provinces, you mean?
Driven from the top down. Basically, like, if you look at England, and 2 years ago England were in a mess, and everyone was questioning Steve Borthwick. He understood how he wanted to play. Okay, as I said, it's data driven, but he understood how he wanted to play, and he's picked players. He's picked players who fit that narrative, and he has a better choice than we have in terms of depth and numbers, but. Now players know if you want to play in the wing for England, you got to win a fair percentage of those aerial contests. You got to win them, your own ones and the ones that kicked onto you and the ones that kicked for you. And if you don't do that, there's another cab coming up who will do that, and that's it. Yeah. Clear. So if you're not doing the work in your club, and you don't have that skill set going into camp, well, you won't even get into camp. You won't even make camp. So again, does Farrell have that luxury? Not as much as England or France, but again, it's how Ireland are going to play. So if kicking and passing are absolute prerequisite skills, and that becomes obvious to people in camp, and that becomes obvious to people who are giving feedback to why they're not in camp, you would expect that to change. Expect it to change because everybody wants to play for Ireland. Yeah. Every professional player in Ireland, eligible for Ireland, wants to be in the Irish squad. So it can change for sure, and. It is disappointing to see it having dropped off, but it can get better. One last thing before we talk about Italy this weekend, on the problems or the perceived problems for Irish rugby at the moment. One of them, and this is a very English-centric view, and I read one article specifically in the Telegraph that suggested that the project player system, because it's now gone essentially, and World Rugby have closed that loophole, that we are the main sufferers because we can't bring in these project players in the 3 years. And you look at the likes of the players that you mentioned already, Mac Hansen, James Gibson Park, CJ Stander, you go back through, I don't know. It's a very English-centric view because they firmly believe we have been the team to benefit most from that over the years. But do you think that there's something in that we have maybe ridden the crest of a wave of a loophole or a law that allowed us to be better than the sum of our parts because we could bring outside players in and make them our own? Yeah, so there was five players who didn't come through the pathway that have been big influences in Ireland. Mac, Finlay, who are exiles with Irish heritage, right? So they're a little bit, they're different in projects, but they didn't come through our pathway, and they added something different. Finlay Bealham, when we badly needed cover, tight head prop, stood up and was excellent. And Mac Hansen gives you that kind of creativity, unpredictability, X factor. So he was great. But then the other three, like Gibson Park, Bundy, and James Lowe, have been vitally important for us, and they were project players. So now there's still potentially project players. I think Nankiville, for example, will qualify for Ireland. It just takes 2 more years. It's 5 years. It's a long process. And we're not going out recruiting players now. So if you look at Leinster's foreign players, and obviously Leinster helped Irish rugby by bringing James Lowe and Gibson Park in as project players. And then they became qualified. But Leinster's foreign players now are Rabbi Slimani, cap for France, going back to Toulon next year. RG Snyman is still playing for South Africa, and Rico Ione playing for New Zealand. So Leinster have changed because of the laws as well. And you could argue that it actually should help Leinster because you're getting proven international quality players
rather than taking a punt. Yeah,
Gibson Park and James Lowe were super rugby players, talented, but they absolutely developed here. And certainly a lot of New Zealand experts are surprised at how good they were in Ireland and how much they helped us. So yeah, that's it. It's not a safety blanket because they were actually way more important. They were way more important to us than a blanket. But that's gone. But again, like that's not a surprise. Like it's only a surprise because we haven't found replacements for them. But the people who were involved in the talent ID pathways should have nearly put the foot down when they saw the fact that there was going to be no more project players, because we need to instead of replacing 2 or 3 players every year, we were going to have to replace, these three at some stage. An extra 3 players over the life cycle of an international coach, and it is a worry because where are you going to find a James Lowe in the system? You know, where are you going to find a Bundy Aki coming through the system? You won't.
Can't.
You can't. You won't. So we obviously need to maybe find a different way of playing. Obviously, in fairness, Bundy probably wouldn't have got picked ahead of Jacob anyway, ahead of Stewart, but he has been an absolute legend for Ireland and Connacht, and hopefully will be again. So yeah, it puts more pressure on the system. But again, I would say, well, I feel sorry for the IRFU to say it again, because they are investing so much money in the pathway, and unfortunately, as of today, it doesn't look like they're going to get a massive return. We could still go and beat Italy and beat Wales and beat Scotland, and maybe run England closer, beat them. But you'd still have to say that Farrell's best chance of doing really well at the next World Cup, as it stands at the moment, is to try and get the players that we already had at the last World Cup, they're intact and on form.
Bob Knight, the famous NCAA basketball coach, used to say, you can stuff your motivational speeches, you can stuff your psychoanalysis. The greatest motivator for players is ass on the bench. Ass on the bench is the greatest motivator of anybody. And I'm wondering, do players get dropped this weekend? Does Andy Farrell say, right, guys, I'm going to have to take action here and show you that I can't do?
I think he will. I think he's been unbelievably patient, and in some ways, that probably because our scrum was so badly taken apart by South Africa, maybe some of those players had a freebie that day, because his argument, or the argument you could make, was that, well, we couldn't really play because we were just absolutely dominant in one area, which is a collective responsibility rather than individual. So I think he was loyal again.
And yeah, you can understand why he's been loyal, right? Yeah. Because these players, they have delivered for him time and time again. So I understand why he's so slow to change that. But maybe now is the time where he has to change it. I mean, he really has no option.
I think the fact that he spoke about intent, and I think if you listened to John Fogarty's interview yesterday, they asked him how we're Ireland going to get better, and he said, by getting back to our standards, okay? By not walking past something and ignoring it. So, and obviously that's a coaching responsibility, but it's a sign of what they've been focusing on this week. And he said there was images to show that this isn't Ireland. So I think he will make changes, and it's a risky one because obviously Italy are coming on the back of a win. But I think long term for Ireland, it'd be better to give others an opportunity who deserve it. So Jack Conan, Nick Timoney, James Ryan was good off the bench. Maybe give Ronan Kelleher a start, have Dan Sheehan on the bench. Furlong maybe come back in. Unfortunately, a lot of the changes are up front that are obvious. Behind the scrum, obviously you could change the halfbacks from the bench to the start. What
about starting Crowley and Prendergast and having two playmakers? Yeah. Is that an option?
It is an option. It would be a real sign that we want to be a team who keep the ball in hand and want to stretch teams. Unfortunately, our centre combinations, whether it's Robbie and Gary, Bundy and Gary, which is predominantly being Stewart and Gary now, it hasn't been something that they've been really good at stepping up as a second playmaker. And we saw, for the Timoney try, Crowley was a 10, Sam was further out. Prendergast used to get away with it Sexton used to get away with it by actually shifting further out. So they would go 9 to 12 to Bundy, and he would play out the back to Johnny. So it was like 1.5 playmakers. He was just getting a little bit further out, and we were so drilled and detailed and comfortable in what we were trying to do. And Johnny was so good at organising the next phase or pod that we didn't really need that second playmaker. But I think you look at Sam now, a young 10. You look at Jack, still young, but a little bit more experienced. It'll be fascinating to see the two of them start together,
wouldn't it?
Yeah,
and the dynamic
and how that affects the game.
Yeah, and it does give you. It opens up an awful lot of different options as well. But equally, then maybe you're closing off certain other styles and methods you could employ to play. But I'd like to see it, I have to say. And maybe against Italy it mightn't be the worst. If you're going to try it against Italy.
It was interesting, Hugh, that the player he picked out of the A game to bring in was Bren Ward, who started the A game on the bench. Right, so if Andy Farrell picked that team, which obviously you would expect he did. Bryn Ward went into that game behind 3 others, okay? But he was the one that he liked. He was sent to do media yesterday, which normally they're in the 23 if they're sent to do media, and he would be a new face. Like, he's obviously, his goal at the start of the season was to play 5 games for Ulster. He hasn't played many, but he was outstanding against, it's particularly against Munster in Ravenhill. He was absolutely outstanding. He carries well. He's explosive. So he could be another new face as such that may come in to the bench. I think a Dogbush has to be in the 23. If Balacloon is fit, would he get a start and really get a chance to see what he can do?
There's raw pace that we need.
There's raw pace, and I don't know what he do to centres. Like, he'll have to be careful he doesn't make too many, but I think the team looks like it needs to be freshened up.
Just on Sexton briefly, obviously famously set the standards, drove everybody, wasn't afraid to tell anyone and everyone if they weren't pulling their weight. Do you think Sexton, the coach, can do that as a coach as much as he did as a player? Or just because it's a different dynamic, he probably feels, I can't be as on top of these guys as I was when I was on the pitch training with them?
I think there's always a different dynamic from when you play and you have that kind of real drive and you're also playing it to learn how to do as a coach. If you listen to Andy Farrell, he would say he's changed over the last 10 years around what he thought a coach should be saying to people and driving them. I think the big thing for Johnny and the strength Johnny has is that tactical influence, and now it's a case of being able to, I suppose, teach the leaders, the game managers, of how to implement that, and that's going to be the area I think that he can really bring. I think standards. Look, it's obvious the way Farrell kind of needed Peter Mahoney and Cian Healy and all those lads to stay till the very end. I think there's definitely the current crop.
There's a fall off there, isn't there?
Well, the current crop are different. They're different personalities, different characters. In terms of, I suppose, the drive that they bring. I think they're all very, from what I understand, they're all very good pros in their own environment and looking after themselves, but in terms of being able to put your head above water and maybe call people out.
But do we need a bit of that, do you think? Do we need a bit of something to say, come on lads, what are we doing here?
Well, Hugh, I know for a fact that the academies, so there's a big drive to find athletes, okay? So find a good like Joe Schmidt was famous. He used to keep telling the Leinster Academy, you find the athlete, I'll make the rugby player, right? So he didn't care if he could catch a pass, or, but if he was a good athlete, he would coach him and make him a rugby player. And still there's obviously a big onus on that. But I certainly know that they've been told to look out for those characters and personalities who have a bit of dog, who have that drive, who have that, who are obstreperous in their kind of nature, and could be good leaders of men. And there might be less good athletes, but at the moment I think there's a shortage of them. There's apparently, and this is coming from academy people.
Yeah.
It's not making it up.
No, absolutely. And because you look, and I'm just looking at the most influential Irish players of the last few years, and that are now on the pitch. Cahill Doris, he's a captain, but he's not that type of player. He doesn't bark. Tyke Byrne is quite softly spoken. He leads by example. You look at even Tyke Fern doesn't say an awful lot on the pitch. Andrew Porter doesn't say a lot on the pitch. Dan Sheehan doesn't say a lot on the pitch. Robbie Henshaw. These guys, as you say, ultimate pros, hugely talented, but there isn't a dog in them that we had the Sexton, the O'Connell.
No, 100%. But the beauty of a team, Hugh, or the beauty of a squad is they're all not alike. Okay, when you have things right, so the Goldilocks porridge, the perfect temperature, that has a little bit of lots of different things that makes something, very, very special. We seem to have a lot of very similar types of personalities, characters at the same time. It's true. It's just the way it's come.
It's just all come out
and it's coincided with a bit of a dip, right? So when there's a dip, misingenuous, but if there is a dip, which I think there is, we have to look and try and find out why. Okay, why? Why is there and obviously you could say Lions tour, you could say fatigue, you could say overly familiar with camp, you could say
retirement,
Leinster, whatever. You could say lots of different things. But one of the things that from the outside you look at and you listen, and as I said, is and you hear what the academy managers are being told to look for. It's that, I suppose, leader of men,
right?
And again, you should always be looking for a leader of men.
But you've been in enough teams, and you've been around enough teams, and you've seen enough to know that these leaders of men is it's the aura we talk about when we talk about Martin Johnson, when we talk about Andy Farrell, the player. You have it, you don't. It's very hard to make that of a player like I'm just like Cahill Dars, who just maybe is not naturally like that.
Yeah, well, no, it's not his natural personality. Sorry, he's a different way of leading than the people we're talking
Different
about.
way.
Different way, right?
Yeah.
So, and he has to be. And if you think of what Ireland, what all the players say makes Ireland so special, and makes Andy Farrell so special, is that everybody can be themselves, right? So if Cahill Dars came in tomorrow and tried to act like Peter Manny, no, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's not going to work either. So
No.
you have to be authentic. But again, it just maybe it's got nothing to do with it. But some of the great teams that we've seen, the sum of the parts, when you add them all up, can be a little bit higher, if you have someone in there who just has that dog. Yeah, dog is a simple way of putting it, but it's effectively that. It's effectively that. And again, this is what will drive Farrell mad, is for Ireland to go to Paris and be lacking intensity, energy, intent. Like, he'll find that so hard to understand. So
I think everyone does.
Yeah, we know, but like, and again, like clips I picked out on Monday weren't showing that, because but they're there. They're there for anyone to see. You look back at that game, and John Fogarty spoke about, they're the clips they're showing.
Yeah.
They're the clips they're showing, which are, this isn't Ireland. This isn't the Ireland that we expect. We forgive a drop ball, we forgive a missed tackle, but we won't forgive, I suppose, a lack of desire or work rate off the ball or physicality. I'd be absolutely shocked if we don't see a response to that. And everything else would look better when you have that, okay? But everything looks really bad when you don't have it.
Yeah, and then look, it's a hiding to nothing this weekend, because they really have to win, and they kind of have to perform, and they have to fix some of those things, the tangibles and intangibles, maybe attitude being first and foremost. Everyone's going to be looking at what's the body language like, what are they doing here, are they hitting into tackles, and if they win and they do all that, then okay, fine, it's a short-term fix and we have England coming, let's focus on that. If they don't do that, all of a sudden people, I mean, if you think last Monday was batting against the head, we'd be sitting, what are we going to say? What are we going to say?
Talk about crisps, Hugh.
On that bombshell, we'll leave it for this week. Enjoy the match. Talk to you next week. Thanks, Mil.